The Young and the Restless spoilers Holden had never belonged. Not officially. Not by invitation. When the elite of Genoa City boarded planes to Nice and waltzed through Kane Ashby's luxurious French estate like they were walking into a fantasy, Holden was already there. No one knew how he arrived. No one remembered extending a welcome. But he moved through the shadows like a man who had studied every weakness of the guests long before the party began. While the others drank and danced, plotting deals and rekindling romances, Holden stood back, watching. Calculating. His silence wasn't shyness, it was surveillance. His disinterest wasn't apathy, it was hunger. Something in his eyes said he wasn't there for champagne or scandal. He was there for something much bigger. And when the bloodshed began and secrets spilled across the marble floors, Holden didn't panic. He watched it all unfold with a kind of cold awe, as if the chaos merely confirmed what he already believed, that everyone had a price, and even the powerful bled red. By the time most of the guests fled back to Genoa City with their reputations in tatters and their alliances more fragile than ever, Holden remained behind, biding his time. Because now, with the noise dying down and the city distracted by Kane's dramatic return, his moment had come. He had studied Kane long enough to know his vulnerabilities. Money? No problem. Allies? Plenty. But love was the hole in Kane's armor. And the only person who had ever truly held his heart was Lily. Their history was messy, scarred by betrayal and shattered dreams, but what they shared had never truly died. And Holden understood that. He understood obsession, the kind that never really fades, only festers. He knew that Kane would burn the world down if it meant saving her. So when Lily vanished, it happened fast. Too fast for anyone to suspect it was calculated. One moment she was leaving a late dinner with Tracy, walking through the quiet stone courtyard of the French estate for a final breath of solitude before departure. The next moment, she was gone. No struggle. No screams. Just the sound of tires skidding softly on gravel and a silence that swallowed her whole. When she woke up, she was somewhere dark, cold, and metallic. A basement. A bunker. A prison. It didn't matter what you called it, the walls didn't answer questions. But Holden did. He stood in front of her, calm, terrifying in his composure. No mask. No need. His voice was level, like he was explaining a business arrangement, not threatening a life. He told Lily she was bait. That he didn't want to hurt her, not unless Kane forced his hand. That all he needed was $10 million. That Kane would get the message soon. And if the police so much as sniffed around? He would end her life before they even made it past security. There was no bravado in his tone, no anger. That was the most horrifying part. He spoke like a man ordering coffee. Like it was already decided. Back in Genoa City, Kane received the message like a dagger to the chest. No blood, just dread. The video was short. Lily bound to a chair, eyes wide, jaw clenched in controlled fear. Holden's voice behind the camera, issuing his demands. 10 million. 2 days. No police. No media. Just Kane and the money. The deadline was set. And the unspoken truth hung thick in the air, Lily's life was a countdown. Panic wasn't something Kane allowed himself often, but this wasn't about power plays or media spins. This was about the one woman who had ever made him want to be better. And he had already failed her too many times. But fear alone wouldn't help him. He needed a plan. Fortunately, Kane had never been short on cunning. 10 million was nothing to him, that was the easy part. The real challenge was delivering the money without triggering Holden's wrath or alerting the authorities. And more importantly, making sure this ended with Lily alive and Holden gone for good. He called no one. Not Amanda. Not Tracy. Not even Devon. He trusted no one, not with Lily's life. Instead, he spent the first 24 hours doing what he did best, researching. Digging. Piecing together fragments of conversations from Nice. Cross-referencing facial recognition from estate cameras. Finding Holden's last known identity. Every shadow the man had moved through now became a data point. And slowly, Kane began to understand. Holden hadn't chosen Lily randomly. He had been circling this moment for months. He knew Kane's habits, his assets, his passwords. This wasn't a crime of opportunity, it was a hostile acquisition, personal and precise. As the second day loomed, Kane loaded a briefcase with the money, exact to the demand. But beneath the cash, concealed in the lining, was something else, a high-frequency tracking device connected to a custom surveillance server Kane had bought years ago for his private security team. He wasn't just going to deliver the money. He was going to track Holden. He knew it was a risk. If Holden inspected the case too closely, it would all be over. But Kane had gambled before. This time, the stakes were just Lily's life. He received a second message that morning. A new location. A GPS ping in an abandoned vineyard outside of town. He dressed simply, left his phone behind, and drove out in silence. He said nothing to anyone. Because if this failed, there would be no second chance. He entered the clearing where Holden stood, alone, gun holstered, eyes cold. The briefcase exchanged hands. No theatrics. No speech. Just a glance, and a soft smile from Holden that suggested he believed he had one. But Kane didn't blink. Because he wasn't there to win. He was there to buy Lily's heartbeat. Holden disappeared into the trees. And Kane waited, breath suspended in time, until he heard the sound of a locked door creaking open. A cry. A rustle. Then Lily, eyes wild, stumbling into the sunlight, alive. Her arms around him. The air came back into his lungs. But Kane knew it wasn't over. Not yet. The tracker was active. Holden was on the move. And now, Kane had leverage of his own. The hunted had just become the hunter. Would you like the next part to focus on Kane launching a secret mission to take Holden down, or Lily discovering something disturbing about what Kane is willing to do in return? Kane sat in his suite at the Genoa City Athletic Club, the lights off, the air stale, his jaw clenched so tight it felt like his bones might shatter. In his hands was a single photograph, the one Holden had sent. Lily, bound to a chair in a dim, concrete room. Her wrists bruised. Her face pale. But it was her eyes that destroyed him, wide with terror, locked in the camera's lens like they were reaching for him, silently begging. He couldn't look away. He couldn't stop his hands from shaking. He had seen many things in his life, deals gone wrong, betrayals, even blood, but nothing had ever cut like this. Nothing had ever made him feel so powerless. And then came the audio. A brief clip. Lily's voice, ragged with fear, whispering through what sounded like tears. Kane, please, save me. I don't want to die. He played it over and over until it carved itself into his skull. Of course, no one wants to die. But this wasn't just fear, this was desperation. He could hear it in her breath, the way it caught on each syllable like it was her last. Holden had done that. That coward. That monster. Kane slammed the photograph down on the table and stood, his chest heaving. Rage didn't even begin to cover what he felt. It was something colder. More surgical. He had money, he had power, but none of it meant anything if he couldn't get Lily out of that hellhole. And what made it worse, what made it unforgivable, was that Holden had dared to cross a line Kane had sworn no one would ever touch. He hadn't just kidnapped Lily. He had threatened her dignity, her soul. Kane knew the kind of man Holden was. He had seen his type before, predators who used fear not just to control, but to destroy. He had intercepted one of Holden's private messages, a chilling voice note left carelessly in the background of another video clip. Holden talking to someone else, maybe no one at all, describing in cold detail what he planned to do if Kane didn't deliver the ransom. Tie her up tighter, maybe let her cry on camera for a bit. Maybe I'll get what I want first. Show him what he's paying to stop. Kane's blood had frozen. The suggestion wasn't subtle. It was revolting. It was the kind of violence no threat of prison could match. He knew then that this wasn't about money. It was about humiliation. Holden wanted to hurt Kane in the one way that couldn't be undone. But Kane was no stranger to psychological warfare. And he knew one truth that Holden hadn't counted on: if someone truly intends to kill their hostage, they don't negotiate. They don't make offers. They don't give deadlines. Holden's 2-day window, his insistence on secrecy, the carefully measured threats, they weren't about murder. They were about leverage. Holden wasn't a killer. He was a blackmailer. And killing Lily wouldn't give him power, it would eliminate it. Once she was gone, Kane had no reason to pay, and every reason to hunt him to the ends of the earth. No, Holden wouldn't kill her. But that didn't make him any less dangerous. Because violence was still violence, and humiliation could be worse than death. Kane knew he had to act fast. The clock was ticking, and every hour put Lily closer to trauma that could scar her forever. $10 million was nothing, he could liquidate that in the time it took to blink. But just paying wasn't enough. He couldn't trust that Holden would release her clean. The man had already shown signs of instability. He enjoyed power. He fed on control. Even if Kane delivered the money, what was to stop Holden from leaking footage, from hurting her out of spite or sick pleasure? He called in one of his last trusted private security contacts, Merrick, an ex-Interpol agent based in Switzerland who owed him a favor. Within minutes, Marek's team was tracking satellite pings from the burner number Holden used. They'd narrowed it down to a region outside Nice. Somewhere along the foothills, old wine country, now riddled with long-abandoned chateaus and underground storage cellars. The kind of place where no screams would be heard. Merrick warned Kane, going in alone would be suicide. Holden likely had traps, surveillance, maybe even backup. But Kane didn't care. He would walk through fire if it meant pulling Lily out of that darkness. He wrote a message to Amanda, just in case. He didn't say everything, just enough. If something happens to me, check the briefcase. Tell Lily I never stopped fighting. Then he sent the $10 million through a silent transfer protocol, masking the transaction through a holding company tied to a fake foundation, just in case Holden got greedy and tried to use it later. It was bait, but it was real. At the same time, Merrick gave him confirmation. A heat signature. A location. An isolated farmhouse with a reinforced underground vault that hadn't been listed on any active real estate ledger for 20 years. Kane didn't wait. He chartered a jet. And as the engines roared beneath him, he thought only of her, Lily, tied up, afraid, possibly crying, maybe praying he'd come through. And he would. Because this wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about vengeance. Holden had crossed the line. And Kane was done negotiating. Would you like to continue with the rescue scene, Kane entering the underground vault, confronting Holden, or a psychological twist where Lily finds her own way to fight back?